Marcus Tate shuffled onto the Horizon Airlines flight in Atlanta, his worn jacket and scuffed shoes blending into the crowd. The cabin buzzed with routine chatter until Evelyn Harper, a senior flight attendant, sneered over the intercom, calling him homeless. Laughter erupted. Marcus, secretly the airline's top investor, smirked, eyes blazing with purpose. As the plane soared, his phone vibrated with a chilling text. "Someone knows my truth. Who sent it? Before we dive in, tell us where you're watching from. If you stand for justice, hit like and subscribe for more gripping tales." The cabin of Horizon Airlines Flight 492 hummed with the low drone of engines as Marcus Tate settled into his first-class seat, the worn fabric of his jacket brushing against the plush leather. His heart still pounded from Evelyn Harper's intercom jab, her voice dripping with scorn as she'd labeled him homeless. The sting of laughter from the other passengers lingered, their eyes darting toward him like he was a sideshow. Marcus kept his gaze on the window, the Atlanta skyline shrinking below, his jaw tight. He was here to evaluate the airline he secretly funded, not to be a punching bag. But Evelyn wasn't done. 30 minutes into the flight, she strutted down the aisle, her crisp uniform glinting under the cabin lights, a tray of drinks balanced in her hands. She stopped at Marcus's row, her lips curling into a smirk as she bypassed him, serving the white businessman beside him a sparkling water. Marcus raised a hand, polite but firm, and said he'd like a coffee. Evelyn's eyes narrowed, her voice sharp as she snapped that first-class service was for paying customers, not charity cases. The businessman chuckled, and a woman across the aisle whispered something to her friend, their giggles slicing through the air. Marcus's pulse quickened, but he kept his tone even, pulling out his boarding pass and sliding it across the armrest. The paper gleamed under the overhead light, clearly marked, "First class, seat 2A." Evelyn's smirk faltered, her cheeks flushing as she snatched the ticket, scanning it like it was a forgery. The cabin grew quiet, passengers craning their necks, sensing a showdown. She muttered something about a mistake, her voice low, but Marcus caught the edge of panic. He leaned back, expecting an apology, but Evelyn's eyes hardened. She shoved the ticket back and hissed that he didn't belong here, that she'd seen his kind try to sneak into first class before. The word kind landed like a slap, heavy with venom, and Marcus's fingers tightened on the armrest, his mind racing. He could reveal who he was, the silent investor who'd poured millions into Horizon, but that would blow his cover. Instead, he forced a smile, saying he'd move if it made her comfortable. The businessman snorted, muttering about troublemakers, and Evelyn's smirk returned, triumphant. She gestured to a cramped middle seat in economy, 20 rows back, next to a flickering overhead light. Marcus gathered his bag, the weight of every stare pressing into his back as he shuffled down the aisle, the hum of whispers following him. He slid into the new seat, the plastic armrest digging into his side, and exhaled slowly, trying to focus. This wasn't just one woman's prejudice. It was a symptom of something rotten in the airline he'd built. He'd deal with it quietly, professionally, once they landed. But Evelyn wasn't finished. Over the intercom, her voice crackled again, sugary sweet, announcing that due to security concerns, certain passengers needed to follow crew instructions. The word certain hung in the air, and Marcus felt the eyes of his new rowmates, a nervous, elderly woman and a teenage boy, shift toward him. The boy pulled out his phone, angling it discreetly, and Marcus realized he was being recorded. He kept his face neutral, but his stomach twisted. This could go viral, and not in a good way. Evelyn appeared again, flanked by a burly male attendant named Greg, who loomed over Marcus's seat. She demanded he explain how he got a first-class ticket, her voice loud enough for half the plane to hear. Greg crossed his arms, his badge glinting, and said they'd have security waiting at the gate if Marcus didn't cooperate. The elderly woman gasped, clutching her purse, and the boy's phone stayed steady, capturing every word. Marcus's mind raced. He could escalate, demand, to speak to the captain. But that would only fuel Evelyn's narrative. Instead, he leaned forward, voice calm, and asked if she was accusing him of theft. Evelyn flinched, her confidence wavering, but Greg barked that he needed to shut up or face consequences. The boy whispered to his mom, loud enough for Marcus to hear that this wasn't right. Marcus caught his eye, nodding slightly, a silent thank you. The tension broke when the captain's voice crackled over the intercom, announcing turbulence and ordering everyone to their seats. Evelyn and Greg retreated, but not before she shot Marcus a look that promised trouble. The plane shuddered through a pocket of rough air, and Marcus gripped the armrest, his mind spinning. He'd planned to observe Horizon's operations, not become their target. The boy, still filming, leaned over and said he'd post the video online to show what happened. Marcus hesitated, then nodded, knowing exposure might be his only leverage. The flight landed in Atlanta 2 hours later, the evening sun casting long shadows across the tarmac. Marcus stepped off the plane, his bag slung over his shoulder, expecting to slip away and regroup. But as he reached the gate, to airport security, officers were waiting, their radios crackling. Evelyn stood behind them, arms crossed, her face a mask of smug satisfaction. She'd filed a report, she said, claiming Marcus had threatened her during the flight, shouting profanities and scaring passengers. The officers, both white, exchanged a glance, their hands resting on their belts. Marcus's heart sank, the weight of her lie settling in. He opened his mouth to protest, but one officer cut him off, saying they'd sort it out at the station. The boy from the plane pushed through the crowd, phone in hand, yelling that he had proof it was a lie. His mom tugged him back, but the video was already uploaded, the notification pinging on his screen. Marcus caught a glimpse of the title. Racist flight attendant humiliates passenger. The officers ignored the boy, ushering Marcus toward a side door, their grip firm on his arm. Evelyn's lips twitched, a flicker of victory, as she turned back to the plane. Marcus's phone buzzed in his pocket, but he couldn't check it, not with the officers leading him away. The video was spreading, he knew. Hashtags like "Justice for Marcus" already trending on social media. He felt a flicker of hope, thinking the truth would surface, that Evelyn's lie would unravel. But as the security door slammed shut behind him, the reality hit. This wasn't just one woman's prejudice. Evelyn had the airline's backing, maybe more. The interrogation room was cold, the fluorescent lights buzzing overhead, and Marcus sat across from the officers, their questions sharp. Had he raised his voice? Had he intimidated the crew? Marcus answered calmly, recounting every detail, but their eyes were skeptical, their notepads barely touched. Outside, he heard muffled shouts, protesters gathering as the video gained traction. His lawyer was on the way, he told himself, and the public was watching. This could force Horizon to act, to fire Evelyn, to admit fault. But deep down, he knew better. The text from the flight echoed in his mind. "We know who you are." Someone was pulling strings, and Evelyn was just the start. As the officers stepped out to confer, Marcus leaned back, the chair creaking under his weight, and steeled himself for what was coming. He'd walked onto that plane to fix his airline, but now he was in a fight he hadn't chosen, one that could cost him everything. The Atlanta morning buzzed with humidity, the air thick as Marcus Tate stepped out of the police station, his lawyer's hand firm on his shoulder. The viral video from the flight had exploded overnight, racking up 2 million views, with hashtags like "Justice for Marcus" trending across social media. Protesters clogged the street, their signs demanding Horizon Airlines fire Evelyn Harper, the flight attendant whose racist mockery had sparked this firestorm. Marcus's phone vibrated nonstop, notifications flooding in from supporters, their messages a mix of outrage and hope. He felt a surge of vindication, the weight of the interrogation room fading under the summer sun. This was his chance to fix the airline he'd poured his fortune into, to root out the rot Evelyn represented. He adjusted his jacket, still the same worn one from the flight, and headed to Horizon's headquarters, a gleaming glass tower 10 miles away. The lobby smelled of polished marble and coffee, and the PR team, a trio of nervous suits, ushered him into a conference room with a view of the city skyline. Their faces paled when Marcus introduced himself not as a victim, but as the airline's silent investor, the man whose millions kept their planes in the sky. The lead PR guy, a sweaty 40-something named Carl, stammered an apology, promising Evelyn would be fired by noon. Marcus leaned back in the leather chair, the city sprawling below, and allowed himself a moment of triumph. He'd exposed Evelyn's prejudice, and now Horizon would have to act. The team scurried out to draft a statement, and Marcus texted his old friend James, a Horizon manager who'd always had his back. James replied instantly, congratulating him and asking to meet for coffee to strategize. Marcus smiled, feeling the tide turning. But the victory was a mirage. By 3 o'clock, Marcus's phone lit up with a breaking news alert. A tabloid headline screamed, "Secret Tycoon Stirs Chaos on Flight." The article, dripping with venom, painted Marcus as a manipulative rich man faking victimhood to sabotage Horizon. It cited an anonymous source close to the airline, and Marcus's stomach dropped. Only a handful of people knew his investor status, and James was one of them. His fingers hovered over his phone, disbelief curling into anger. But before he could call, James's number flashed on the screen. Marcus answered, his voice tight, and James's tone was rushed, apologetic, claiming he'd only told a reporter friend to help Marcus's case. The betrayal cut deeper than Evelyn's words, a knife twisted by someone he'd trusted for a decade. Marcus hung up. The conference room suddenly claustrophobic, its sleek walls closing in. He refreshed the news app, and the story had spread. Pundits on every network debating whether Marcus was a hero or a fraud. His lawyer called, warning that public opinion was shifting, that Horizon might use this to dodge accountability. Marcus paced, the carpet muffling his steps, and checked social media. The hashtags were splitting. Marcus the fraud gaining traction alongside Justice for Marcus. He scrolled through comments, some calling him a liar, others vowing to boycott Horizon. The chaos felt like a storm he couldn't outrun, each notification a gust pushing him off balance. Then, as the sun dipped below the skyline, casting the room in orange, a TV in the lobby flickered on, and Evelyn Harper's face filled the screen. She sat on a national talk show, her eyes glistening with crocodile tears, her voice trembling as she claimed Marcus had harassed her on the flight, shouting threats that left her fearing for her life. The host nodded sympathetically, and the audience gasped, their murmurs fueling Evelyn's performance. She dabbed her eyes, saying she'd been unfairly targeted, that Marcus's wealth didn't excuse his behavior. The camera panned to a crowd outside the studio, some holding signs supporting Evelyn, their faces twisted with anger. Marcus's breath caught, the room spinning. Horizon hadn't fired her. They'd reinstated her, spinning her as the victim. His phone buzzed again, a text from an unknown number. "You can't hide forever." The same chilling tone as the one from the flight. He gripped the phone, his knuckles whitening, as the TV replayed Evelyn's sob story, her lies sinking into millions of homes. The PR team slunk back in, avoiding his gaze, muttering about damage control. Carl admitted the executives were backing Evelyn, claiming her story tested better with focus groups. Marcus's vision blurred, rage and betrayal colliding. He'd walked into Horizon thinking he'd won, that his money and truth would be enough. But the system was rigged, from James's leak to Evelyn's televised lies, all orchestrated to protect the airline's image. The protesters outside were still chanting, their voices faint through the glass, but Marcus knew the tide could turn against them too. He left the tower, the evening air heavy with the scent of exhaust and jasmine, and slipped into a cab, his mind racing. The driver, a black man in his 60s, glanced at him in the rearview mirror and said he'd seen the video, that he believed Marcus. It was a small comfort, but it grounded him, a reminder of why he was fighting. As the cab wove through Atlanta's neon-lit streets, Marcus planned his next move. He'd sue Horizon, drag their corruption into court, and expose Evelyn's lies. The lawyer had already started the paperwork, and the viral video was still out there, a weapon he could wield. But the unknown texter's words gnawed at him, a shadow lurking behind Evelyn's smug face. Who was pulling the strings? Was James's betrayal just the start? Hey folks, let's talk about this. Have you ever seen someone's truth twisted by lies? Comment 1 if you're raging at how Evelyn flipped the script, or 2 if you think Marcus needs to fight harder. Like this video, hit subscribe, and ring that bell to join the fight for justice. Now, here's the big question. Can Marcus turn the tables in court, or will the system crush him before he gets there? Marcus Tate stood outside the Atlanta courthouse, the August sun scorching the pavement, its heat radiating through his worn sneakers. The building loomed, a gray stone giant with columns that seemed to mock his hope. 2 weeks had passed since Evelyn Harper's tearful TV lies, her reinstatement by Horizon Airlines fueling a firestorm of hashtags and protests. The viral video from the flight, now at 10 million views, had rallied supporters who lined the street, their signs bobbing. Like waves, "Fire Evelyn, justice for Marcus." Their chants echoed, a pulse of defiance against the humid air, and Marcus felt their energy, a lifeline after James's betrayal and the media's smear. He'd hired Angela Reed, a sharp black lawyer known for dismantling corporate giants, and together they'd filed a lawsuit against Horizon for defamation and discrimination. The case was airtight, Angela said, with the video, passenger testimonies, and Marcus's investor status as proof. Today was the trial's opening, and Marcus adjusted his tie, a navy one he'd bought to replace his tattered jacket, ready to face Evelyn and her executive backers. Inside, the courtroom smelled of polished wood and tension, the air conditioning humming faintly. Angela stood tall, her briefcase stuffed with evidence, and Marcus sat beside her, his hands steady despite the knot in his gut. The gallery buzzed with reporters, their pens scratching, and supporters cramming the benches, their whispers a low hum. Evelyn sat across the room, her uniform crisp, her face a mask of practiced innocence. Behind her, Horizon's legal team, a pack of slick suits, exchanged smirks, their confidence grating. The judge, a white man in his 60s named Harold Vance, entered, his robes swishing, and Marcus caught a flicker of sympathy in his eyes as he scanned the room. Angela opened with a firestorm, her voice cutting through the silence, recounting Evelyn's racist mockery on the flight, the false threat report, and the media smear. She played the viral video on a courtroom screen, the boys' footage crisp, showing Evelyn's sneer and Marcus's calm restraint. The gallery gasped, and Marcus saw jurors shift, their faces hardening. Angela then dropped a bomb. Internal Horizon emails, obtained through a whistleblower, documenting Evelyn's history of racist complaints against passengers, all swept under the rug by executives. The evidence was damning, and Marcus's chest swelled with hope. Judge Vance leaned forward, his pen pausing, and asked Horizon's lead attorney, a gaunt man named Preston, to respond. Preston fumbled, claiming the emails were taken out of context, but his voice lacked conviction. Marcus exchanged a glance with Angela, her nod subtle but triumphant. The courtroom felt alive, the tide turning, and Marcus imagined the headlines: Horizon exposed, justice served. He pictured Evelyn's smug face crumbling, her career in ruins, and Horizon forced to reform. The first day ended with Angela's closing argument, a call for accountability that left the gallery cheering. Marcus stepped outside. The evening, air cooler now, and supporters swarmed him, their hands clapping his back, their voices promising victory. A young woman handed him a water bottle, saying she'd flown Horizon and seen Evelyn's type before. Marcus thanked her, his resolve hardening. This wasn't just his fight, it was theirs too. He slept that night in a budget motel, 6 miles from the courthouse, dreaming of a world where truth won. But the system had other plans. The next morning, Marcus returned to the courtroom, the crowd outside louder, their signs now joined by TV crews from national networks. Angela whispered that the case was trending worldwide, pressure mounting on Horizon. The second day was meant to feature witness testimonies, including the boy from the flight, but Judge Vance entered with a different demeanor, his eyes avoiding Marcus, his hands clutching a stack of papers. Without warning, he banged his gavel, his voice flat as he announced the case was dismissed. Insufficient evidence, he said, his words slicing through the room like a blade. The gallery erupted, supporters shouting, reporters scrambling, but Vance raised a hand, silencing them. He claimed the emails were inadmissible, the video inconclusive, and Marcus's investor status irrelevant. Angela leaped to her feet, demanding an explanation, but Vance cut her off, his tone final, and exited to his chambers. Marcus sat frozen, the room spinning, his hope shattered like glass. Angela gripped his arm, whispering that this wasn't right, that Vance's ruling reeked of corruption. The Horizon lawyers grinned, Evelyn's lips twitching with victory, and Marcus realized the fix was in. Supporters stormed out, their protests swelling outside, but Marcus felt the ground shift beneath him. He'd believed in the law, in justice, but the system was a machine, oiled by power and prejudice. As he left the courthouse, the crowd parted, their faces a mix of rage and despair, and Marcus tried to speak, to rally them, but his voice caught. Then, from the edge of the steps, 2 Atlanta police officers pushed through, their badges glinting under the noon sun. The lead officer, a burly white man with a buzz cut, called Marcus's name, his hand on his holster. They were arresting him, he said, for the threat Evelyn claimed on the flight, now backed by her televised lies and Horizon's pull. The second officer grabbed Marcus's wrist, cuffs snapping shut, the metal cold against his skin. The crowd roared, phones filming, but a group of counter-protesters, Evelyn's supporters, emerged from nowhere, their signs vile, their cheers drowning out the justice chants. They screamed slurs, their faces red, and one spat at Marcus's feet as the officers led him to a squad car. The cuffs bit into his wrists, the car's interior smelling of sweat and vinyl, and Marcus stared out the window, the courthouse shrinking in the distance. Angela shouted that she'd get him out, her voice fading as the car pulled away. The counter-protesters' signs flashed by, their hatred a mirror of Evelyn's, and Marcus's mind raced. The dismissal wasn't random. Horizon's executives had gotten to Vance, bribed him, turned the law against him. The arrest was their next move, a public humiliation to bury his fight. His phone, confiscated by the officers, held that unknown texter's message, a clue to who was orchestrating this. But Marcus had no access, no allies in this moment. The squad car hit a pothole, jolting him, and he closed his eyes, picturing the supporters, the boys' video, the truth still out there. He'd trusted the courts, thought his money and evidence would be enough. But Evelyn and her backers played a dirtier game. As the car sped toward the detention center, 3 miles away, Marcus vowed to keep fighting, to expose the bribe, to tear down Horizon's lies. But the cuffs tightened, and the officers' radios crackled with orders, their words a blur. How deep did this corruption run? The Atlanta detention center's steel door slammed shut behind Marcus Tate, the sound echoing like a gunshot through the concrete corridor. The air was stale, heavy with the stench of bleach and sweat, and the fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting harsh shadows. His wrists ached from the cuffs, now removed. But the humiliation of his arrest outside the courthouse lingered. Those racist counter-protesters' slurs ringing in his ears. The squad car's 3-mile drive had felt endless. The officers, radios crackling with updates about protests swelling downtown, supporters still rallying despite the rigged dismissal of his lawsuit against Horizon Airlines. Marcus stood in the processing room, his navy tie loosened, his worn sneakers scuffing the grimy floor as a guard, a broad-shouldered white man named Kessler, shoved a jumpsuit at him. Kessler's eyes glinted with contempt, his voice low as he muttered that troublemakers like Marcus didn't last long here. The guard's badge caught the light, and Marcus noticed a nod exchanged with another officer, a signal he couldn't decode but felt in his gut. Evelyn Harper's allies, maybe even her executive backers at Horizon, had reached this place too. The thought tightened his chest, but he kept his face blank, changing into the orange jumpsuit, its fabric rough against his skin. They led him to a cell block, the walls scarred with graffiti, the air thick with shouts from other inmates. Kessler pushed him into a 6-by-8-foot cell, the metal bunk creaking under a thin mattress. The door clanged shut, and Marcus sat, the cold steel biting through the jumpsuit. He was alone, but not for long. Kessler returned an hour later, smirking, and announced Marcus was being moved to solitary for disruptive behavior, though he'd done nothing but sit quietly. The solitary cell was smaller, 5 by 7 feet, with a flickering bulb and a drain in the floor that reeked of mildew. The door sealed him in, and the silence was suffocating, broken only by the drip of a distant pipe. Marcus paced. 3 steps one way, 3 back, his mind racing. Evelyn's false threat claim had landed him here, but this wasn't random. Her network, those shadowy executives, had tipped off the guards, ensuring he'd suffer. By the second day, the punishment intensified. Kessler and another guard, a wiry man named Holt, skipped his meals, sliding an empty tray through the slot, with a chuckle. Marcus's stomach growled, his throat dry, the 90-degree heat in the cell making his head throb. He banged on the door, demanding water, but Holt shouted back that he'd get nothing until he learned respect. The word respect dripped with the same venom Evelyn had used on the flight, a reminder of the system's weight against him. Marcus slumped against the wall, sweat beading on his forehead, and thought of the supporters outside the courthouse, their signs, their hope. He couldn't let them down, couldn't let Evelyn win. On the third day, a new inmate was brought to the cell next to his, the wall thin enough for whispers to carry. The man, Rico, a wiry Latino in his late 20s, had heard about Marcus's case on the news. His voice was rough but kind, and he slipped a piece of stale bread through a crack in the wall, saying he'd swiped it from a guard's lunch. Marcus took it, the crust crumbling in his hands, and whispered thanks, his voice hoarse. Rico said he knew a way to get messages out, that he'd done it before. Marcus's heart leapt, a spark of hope in the darkness. He scribbled a note to his lawyer, Angela, on a scrap of toilet paper, detailing the guard's abuse and begging for a bail hearing. Rico promised to smuggle it to a sympathetic janitor, and Marcus felt a surge of relief, the first in days. By the 48th hour, Angela worked her magic, pulling strings with a judge who wasn't in Horizon's pocket. The cell door swung open, and a different guard, a black woman with tired eyes, led Marcus out, saying his bail was posted. He stumbled into the daylight, the August sun blinding after the dim cell, and found a crowd waiting outside the detention center, 2 miles from downtown. Supporters cheered, their voices a roar, holding signs that read "Free Marcus, End Horizon's Lies." Angela stood at the front, her suit crisp despite the heat, and hugged him, whispering that the protests had forced the city's hand. Marcus's legs shook, the bread from Rico still his only food, but he raised a fist, the crowd erupting louder. He scanned their faces, strangers who believed in him, and felt a fire reignite. He was out, the truth was still alive, and Evelyn's lies could be fought. But the victory was fleeting. As Marcus climbed into Angela's car, a sleek black sedan parked across the street, a notification pinged on her phone. A new video had dropped online, already at 500,000 views. Angela played it, and Marcus's blood ran cold. The grainy footage, clearly doctored, showed him in the detention center, seemingly lunging at Kessler, his fist raised. The audio, manipulated, had him shouting threats, words he'd never said. The caption read, "Marcus Tate attacks guard, proving his violence." The crowd's cheers faded as some pulled out their phones, gasps spreading. Angela cursed, saying this was Horizon's doing, Evelyn's team at work. Marcus stared at the screen, his face twisted in the fake video, and heard tires screech. He turned to see a mob, 50 strong, spilling from a side street, their faces contorted with rage, many wearing the same hateful symbols as the courthouse counter-protesters. They carried bats and bottles, chanting his name like a curse, and Angela gunned the engine, peeling away. But it was too late. That night, Marcus learned the mob had tracked his address from the tabloid leak, converging on his modest 2-bedroom home, 6 miles away. They'd smashed windows, spray-painted slurs across the walls, and set fire to his porch, the flames gutting half the house before firefighters arrived. The news showed the wreckage, the charred remains of his couch, his books, his life. Angela drove him to a safe house, a cramped apartment 10 miles out, and Marcus sat on a sagging couch, his hands trembling. The doctored video was everywhere, trending with hashtags like Marcus the Threat, drowning out his supporters. Evelyn's allies had orchestrated this, turning his release into a trap, painting him as a monster to justify their hate. The safe house's single window overlooked a quiet street, but Marcus felt eyes watching, the same shadow behind that unknown texter's messages. Rico's bread, Angela's fight, the crowd's cheers, they'd gotten him this far, but now his home was gone, his name poisoned. He clenched his fists, the jumpsuit's orange still vivid in his mind, and vowed to keep fighting. But as sirens wailed in the distance, he wondered who was behind this latest blow, and how much worse it could get. Marcus Tate's reflection stared back from the cracked mirror of a tiny bathroom, his eyes hollow under the dim bulb of the safe-house apartment. The air smelled of damp carpet and instant coffee, a far cry from his now charred home, 6 miles away, gutted by a racist mob fueled by Evelyn Harper's doctored video. The August night pressed against the single window, Atlanta's skyline a distant glow 12 miles out. Angela, his lawyer, had arranged this hideout, a one-bedroom in a rundown complex, but Marcus felt exposed. The memory of that unknown texter's threat, "You can't hide forever," looping in his mind. His phone, returned after his release from jail, buzzed with messages from supporters. Their words a faint lifeline after the detention center's brutality and the courthouse betrayal. He'd lost everything, his house, his reputation, but not his fight. Horizon Airlines, the company he'd funded with millions, was shielding Evelyn, their executives orchestrating lies to bury him. Marcus sank onto the sagging couch, its springs creaking, and scrolled through social media. The Mascara Justice for Marcus hashtag still flickered, but Mascara Marcus, the threat was louder, boosted by bots and Evelyn's allies. He needed a plan, a way to rebuild, to strike back. A friend, Carla, a nurse who'd marched at the courthouse, offered her suburban home 15 miles away, in a quiet, mostly white neighborhood called Willow Creek. Marcus hesitated, the sting of Evelyn's homeless jab echoing, but Carla insisted, saying her guest room was his for as long as he needed. By morning, he packed his few belongings, a toothbrush, a spare shirt, and drove Carla's borrowed sedan through Atlanta's sprawling suburbs, the 95-degree heat shimmering off the asphalt. Willow Creek's manicured lawns and picket fences felt like another world, kids on bikes glancing at him as he pulled into Carla's driveway. Her house was a cozy 2-story, its porch lined with potted ferns, and Carla welcomed him with a hug, her scrub still on from an overnight shift. Marcus felt a flicker of safety, the first in weeks, and set his bag in the guest room, its quilted bed a stark contrast to the detention center's steel bunk. He thanked Carla, promising to stay low, to regroup. That afternoon, Marcus sat at her kitchen table, the scent of her baking cornbread grounding him, and launched a crowdfunding campaign.
He typed a post, raw and honest, detailing the rigged trial, the jail abuse, and the mob's attack. He asks for help to rebuild his life to fighting horror. This post, when live within hours, sport.
$5,000, then 10, then 20. Supporters shared it, their comments vowing to stand with him, to boycott Horizon. By evening, the campaign hit $50,000, and Marcus's chest swelled, hope sparking. He pictured a fresh start, a war chest to sue Horizon again. Carla clapped his shoulder, saying the people were with him. He believed her, believed he could rise from the ashes. But Willow Creek had other plans. The next morning, a letter slid under Carla's door, printed on crisp HOA stationery, signed by the president, a woman named Deborah Klein. It cited complaints about an unauthorized guest claiming Marcus's presence violated community rules. The letter demanded he leave by noon or face legal action, calling him a known criminal, a clear nod to the doctored video. Marcus's stomach twisted, the crowdfunding's glow fading. Carla tore the letter up, her voice fierce, saying no one could dictate who stayed in her home. But by lunchtime, neighbors gathered outside, their whispers sharp, their stares cold. A man in a polo shirt clutching a clipboard approached, introducing himself as Deborah's husband, Tom. He said Willow Creek was a safe community, that Marcus's history, the protests, the news, made folks nervous. Carla snapped back, calling it racism. But Tom's smile was thin, his eyes unyielding. Marcus stood behind her, silent, his pulse racing. He'd seen this before, Evelyn's sneer in a new form, the system wearing a neighbor's face. That night, Marcus woke to a crash, the guest room's window rattling. He bolted upright, the clock glowing 2 a.m, and smelled smoke, acrid and sharp. Peering outside, he froze. A wooden cross blazed on Carla's lawn, flames licking 8 feet high, casting eerie shadows across the street. Neighbors watched from their porches, some filming, none moving to help. Carla ran out, her phone dialing 911, but Marcus grabbed her arm, pulling her back as a bottle sailed from the darkness, shattering against the porch. The fire's heat stung his face, and he heard shouts, slurs cutting through the crackle of flames. Carla's hands shook, her voice breaking as she said this was her home, her sanctuary. Marcus's jaw tightened, guilt flooding him. He'd brought this here, Evelyn's network tracking him, twisting Willow Creek against him. Fire trucks arrived, their sirens wailing, but the cross's ashes smeared the lawn, a scar that wouldn't fade. By dawn, Carla's neighbors had taped a new HOA notice to her door, threatening fines if Marcus stayed. He knew he had to leave, to protect her, to keep fighting elsewhere. But the final blow landed as he packed. His phone pinged, a notification from the crowdfunding platform. The account was frozen, the $50,000 gone, drained by a hacker who'd rerouted it to an offshore account. The platform's email cited suspicious activity, but Marcus knew better. Evelyn's team, maybe the same shadow behind the texts, had struck again, stripping him of his last resource. He stood in Carla's driveway, the morning sun harsh, his bag slung over his shoulder. Carla hugged him, tears in her eyes, saying she'd fight the HOA, but Marcus shook his head, saying he couldn't risk her safety. He climbed into the sedan, the engine rumbling, and drove away, Willow Creek's pristine streets blurring past. The cross's smoke still clung to his clothes, the crowdfunding's loss a weight in his chest. He was homeless now, penniless, hunted by a system that wouldn't quit. But as he merged onto the highway, 12 miles from Atlanta's heart, he gripped the wheel, his resolve hardening. He'd find a new way, a new fight. Who was behind that hack, and what would they do next? Hey folks, let's dive into this. Ever had your safe space turned against you? Comment 1 if you're furious at Willow Creek's racism, or 2 if you think Marcus deserves a break. Like this video, hit subscribe and tap that bell to stay with this fight for justice. Now, here's the real question. Can Marcus find allies to strike back, or will Evelyn's network crush him first? Marcus Tate crouched in the backseat of a beat-up van, the engine's rumble vibrating through his bones as it weaved through Atlanta's back streets. The August night was thick, the air heavy with the scent of asphalt and distant rain. 10 miles from the smoldering ashes of Carla's lawn in Willow Creek. His clothes still carried the faint sting of smoke from the cross burning, and his phone, now on its last bar of battery, held no new messages, only the echo of that crowdfunding hack that had stolen $50,000. Evelyn Harper's network, those faceless executives at Horizon Airlines, had stripped him of his home, his funds, his safety. But Marcus's resolve burned hotter than ever. He'd driven Carla's sedan to a rendezvous point, a graffiti-tagged warehouse in an industrial district where a contact had promised shelter. The van's driver, a wiry woman with dreadlocks named Lena, glanced at him in the rearview mirror, her eyes sharp but kind. She led an activist group, the Atlanta Justice Collective, known for exposing corporate corruption, and had reached out after seeing Marcus's crowdfunding post. The van's interior smelled of oil and old leather, and Lena's voice cut through. The hum, saying she'd been following his fight since the viral flight video, now at 15 million views. Marcus nodded, his throat tight, grateful for an ally after the betrayal of James and the mob's wrath. They arrived at a nondescript loft, its windows boarded 8 miles from downtown. Inside, the space buzzed with energy, laptops glowing on folding tables, posters of past protests plastered on brick walls. Lena introduced Marcus to her team, a dozen activists, Black, Latino, and white, their faces lit with purpose. They'd, hacked Horizon's servers, Lena said, uncovering a secret slush fund Evelyn used to bribe city officials, judges, even media outlets to spin her lies. The fund's ledger, displayed on a cracked monitor, showed payments to Judge Vance, who dismissed Marcus's lawsuit, and to the tabloid that smeared him. Marcus's pulse raced, the pieces clicking. Evelyn wasn't just a racist flight attendant. She was a cog in a machine, backed by Horizon's elite. Lena handed him a burner phone, its screen scratched, and said they could leak the ledger to a journalist friend, Sarah, who'd broken similar stories. Marcus agreed, his fingers trembling as he typed a summary of the evidence, his words raw, detailing the flight, the trial, the jail, the mob. The loft's air was warm, 90 degrees despite a rattling fan, and sweat beaded on his neck as Sarah confirmed receipt, promising a front-page exposé. By midnight, the story hit, the headline screaming, "Horizon Airlines bribes officials to silence investor." The article spread like wildfire, racking up 1 million hits in hours, and Horizon's stock plummeted 10% by dawn. Social media erupted. Horizon corrupt trending globally, and Marcus watched the chaos unfold on a borrowed laptop, the screen's glow casting shadows across his face. Lena clapped his back, her laugh fierce, saying they'd hit Horizon where it hurt. Marcus felt a rush, a real victory this time, not the fleeting hope of the courthouse or crowdfunding. He pictured Evelyn's smug face cracking, her allies scrambling as the world saw their corruption. The loft buzzed with plans, the team plotting protests, lawsuits, boycotts. Marcus allowed himself a moment to breathe, the weight of weeks lifting, believing he'd finally turned the tide. But the system struck back, faster and harder than he'd imagined. At 3 a.m, Lena's phone buzzed with a tip from a mole in the Atlanta PD. Horizon's executives, panicked by the leak, had fed the feds a lie, framing Lena's group as a terrorist cell plotting to sabotage the airline. The evidence was fabricated, doctored emails and fake manifests, but it was enough. Sirens wailed outside, red and blue lights flashing through the boarded windows, and the loft plunged into chaos. Lena shouted orders, activists shoving laptops into bags, tearing down posters. Marcus's heart pounded, the burner phone slipping in his sweaty grip. SWAT teams breached the door, their boots thundering, flashlights slicing through the dark. Marcus dove behind a crate, his breath shallow, as Lena faced the officers, her hands raised, demanding a warrant. They cuffed her, her dreadlocks swinging. As they dragged her out, her voice defiant even as it faded. The team scattered, some arrested, others slipping through a back exit. Marcus crawled to a vent, its metal cold against his palms, and squeezed through, emerging in an alley slick. With rain, he ran, the sirens fading, his sneakers splashing through puddles, the city's neon lights blurring past. His chest burned, the 8-mile sprint leaving him gasping in a vacant lot, the grass damp under his knees. Lena was gone, her sacrifice, buying him time, but the terrorist label was a death sentence, painting the collective as extremists and Marcus as their accomplice. His face was on every news channel, a grainy photo from the flight now captioned, "Fugitive Investor." The exposé, meant to crush Horizon, had backfired, Evelyn's team twisting it into a weapon. Marcus checked the burner phone, its battery at 5%, and saw a new text from the unknown number. "Run all you want, we're always ahead." The words chilled him, a reminder of the shadow behind Evelyn, someone with power beyond Horizon's boardroom. He tucked the phone away, the lot's silence broken by a distant helicopter, its searchlight sweeping the city. Lena's team was shattered, his name toxic, but the ledger was out there, the truth still alive. Marcus stood, his legs shaky, and slipped into the shadows, heading for a contact Lena had mentioned, a safe house 12 miles away. He'd lost another ally, another home, but the fight wasn't over. Evelyn's network had escalated, weaponizing the law itself, and Marcus knew they wouldn't stop. As he moved through the rain-soaked streets, the helicopter's hum fading, he vowed to expose the mastermind, to tear down their empire. But who was hunting him, and what was their next move? Marcus Tate slipped through Atlanta's dawn shadows, his breath ragged, the rain-soaked streets glinting under flickering streetlights. The SWAT raid on Lena's loft, 12 hours ago, had left him a fugitive, the terrorist label plastered across every news channel, his face a grainy mugshot beside words like dangerous and fugitive investor. The burner phone in his pocket, down to 3% battery, held that chilling text, "Run all you want, we're always ahead." Evelyn Harper's network, those Horizon Airlines executives, had turned his exposé into a trap, framing Lena's group and hunting him through the city's veins. His sneakers, still damp from the alley escape 8 miles back, squeaked as he reached a safe house, a dingy basement apartment 5 miles from downtown. The contact, a grizzled activist named Jamal, handed him a hoodie and a plan. Crash Horizons. Annual shareholders meeting today, September 1st, at the Grand Regency Hotel, 3 miles away. Marcus's investor status, still a secret to most, could force the board to act, to fire Evelyn, to admit corruption. The idea was reckless, but Marcus's blood burned with purpose. He'd lost his home, his allies, his name, but he could still fight. By 10 in the morning, Marcus stood outside the hotel, its glass facade towering against a 90-degree sky, the air thick with exhaust and tension. Security guards patrolled the entrance, their radios crackling, and Marcus pulled the hoodie, low, his heart pounding. Jamal had slipped him a stolen badge, and he flashed it, slipping past a distracted guard into the lobby's marble coolness. The meeting was on the 10th floor, a ballroom packed with suits clutching coffee and stock reports. Marcus blended in, his hoodie swapped for a borrowed blazer, its cuffs too short, and took a seat in the back, the chandelier's light stinging his eyes. The CEO, a silver-haired man named Richard Holt, opened with a slick speech, dodging the bribe scandal Lena's leak had unleashed, claiming Horizon was thriving. Marcus's jaw tightened, the room's murmurs a low hum, and he waited, his moment building. Halfway through, Holt opened the floor for questions, and Marcus stood, his voice steady, cutting through the chatter. He introduced himself as Marcus, Tate silent investor, the man mocked by Evelyn, framed by Horizon, hunted for telling the truth. The room froze, gasps rippling, smartphones rising to record. Marcus laid it bare. Evelyn's racism, the bribed judge, the doctored video, the cross-burning, the terrorist label. He demanded Evelyn's firing, Holt's resignation, a full investigation. The shareholders, a sea of stunned faces, erupted, some clapping, others shouting objections. Holt's face paled, his hands gripping the podium, but he recovered, promising a thorough review, his voice oily. Marcus felt a surge, the crowd's energy electric, believing he'd forced their hand. Security hesitated, unsure whether to eject him, and Marcus sat, his pulse racing, hope flickering. Holt adjourned the meeting, and shareholders swarmed Marcus, some offering support, others sneering, but the promise of action felt like a win. He slipped out, the hotel's air conditioning a brief relief, thinking he'd finally cracked Horizon's armor. But the victory was a mirage. As Marcus stepped onto the street, a crowd had gathered, not supporters but a mob of protesters, their signs vicious. Marcus Tate, fraud and terrorist. Their chants were a wall of hate, their faces twisted, many echoing the courthouse counter-protesters, Evelyn's allies in new form. The mob, 200 strong, blocked the sidewalk, their banners flapping in the humid breeze. Marcus froze, the hotel's shadow looming, and scanned for an exit, but the crowd pressed closer, bottles and fists raised. He backed toward an alley, his blazer sticking to his sweat-soaked skin, when a sharp crack split the air. Pain seared his left arm, a grazing wound, blood trickling through his sleeve. A sniper, hidden on a rooftop across the street, had fired. The shot meant to kill. Marcus dove behind a dumpster, its metal warm against his back, his breath shallow. The mob roared, some scattering, others surging forward, and police sirens wailed, converging 3 blocks away. Marcus's arm throbbed, the blood staining his cuff. But adrenaline pushed him to run, weaving through the alley's maze, its walls slick with graffiti and grime. The sniper's shot was no accident. Evelyn's team, maybe the texter's shadow, had orchestrated this, escalating from lies to murder. He tore off the blazer, wrapping it around his arm, and sprinted 4 blocks, the city's pulse chaotic, horns blaring, the mob's shouts fading. Marcus reached a bus stop, its bench splintered, and collapsed, his vision blurring. The shareholders' promise echoed, Holt's oily words now hollow. He'd thought exposing himself would force change, but Horizon had countered with a mob and a bullet. His face was everywhere, wanted posters on every corner, the terrorist label cementing his isolation. The burner phone buzzed, a final message before it died. You were warned. Marcus's stomach churned, the words a taunt from someone above Evelyn, someone with power to weaponize crowds and snipers. He boarded a bus, its diesel fumes choking, and slunk to the back, the wound stinging under the makeshift bandage. The city rolled past, 7 miles to another contact Jamal had named. A last chance to hide. Lena's arrest, Carla's lawn, his burned home, they all pointed to a machine that wouldn't stop. Marcus's arm ached, but his mind sharpened, replaying the meeting, the mob, the shot. He'd shaken Horizon, made them desperate, and that was something. He'd find a way to expose the sniper, to trace the texter, to fight on. But as the bus lurched through Atlanta's neon-lit streets, the police radios crackled nearby, their lights flashing in the distance. How close were they, and who had pulled that trigger? Marcus Tate staggered through Atlanta's underbelly, the September dusk cloaking him as he clutched his grazed arm, the blood-soaked hoodie sleeve sticking to his skin. The sniper's shot at the shareholders' meeting, 3 hours ago, had turned him into prey, his face on every wanted poster, the terrorist label a noose tightening around him. The bus ride 7 miles from the hotel had dumped him in a maze of crumbling warehouses, the air sharp with rust and gasoline. His burner phone was dead, its last text, "You were warned," a ghost in his mind. Evelyn Harper's network, those Horizon Airlines puppeteers, had escalated from lies to bullets, and Marcus's legs burned from running, his breath ragged. He needed sanctuary, a place to regroup, to plan. Rico, his cellmate from the detention center, had given him an address during those dark days, a safe house run by his crew, 4 miles away in a derelict neighborhood. Marcus navigated by memory, the streets lit by flickering sodium lamps, their hum mingling with distant traffic. The safe house was a sagging row house, its windows taped with cardboard, the door marked by a faint red X. Rico answered his knock, his wiry frame filling the doorway, his eyes lighting with recognition. He pulled Marcus inside, the room dim, smelling of stale beer and cigarette ash. 2 others, a woman named Tasha and a man called Dre, nodded warily, their laptops casting blue glows across a scarred table. Rico bandaged Marcus's arm, the gauze tight, and offered him a can of soda, its fizz a small comfort. Marcus exhaled, the weight of the sniper's shot easing, and explained the meeting, the mob, the bullet. Rico listened, his face hard, and said he'd heard about Lena's arrest, the SWAT raid, the terrorist frame. His crew had access to Horizon's servers, he said, through a back door they'd cracked months ago. Marcus's pulse quickened, hope flickering. If they could dig deeper, find proof of Evelyn's crimes, they could expose her network, maybe even the sniper's paymaster. Tasha fired up her laptop, her fingers flying, and pulled up Horizon's internal files, a labyrinth of encrypted data. Marcus leaned in, the screen's light stinging his eyes, and spotted a folder labeled Oversight. Dre cracked it, revealing emails between Evelyn and FAA officials, detailing bribes to ignore Horizon's safety violations, planes flying with faulty engines, unreported near misses. The sums were staggering, millions funneled through shell, companies enough to ground the airline if exposed. Marcus's chest swelled, a plan forming. He'd leak this to Sarah, the journalist from Lena's team, and blow the lid off Horizon's corruption. Rico grinned, saying this was their shot, and Tasha uploaded the files to a secure drive, the progress bar crawling in the humid room, 92 degrees despite a rattling window unit. By midnight, Sarah had the evidence, promising a national story by morning. Marcus sank into a folding chair, its metal creaking, believing he'd found the kill shot. The FAA emails would sink Evelyn, force regulators to act, and clear his name. He pictured Horizon's stock crashing, executives scrambling, the terrorist label crumbling under the truth. Rico slapped his shoulder, saying they were in this together, and Marcus nodded, grateful for allies after so much loss. But the safe house's walls hid a snake. At 2 a.m, Marcus woke on a cot, his arm throbbing, to a bitter taste in his mouth. The soda Rico had given him, now empty on the floor, had been spiked, his limbs heavy, his vision swimming. Rico stood over him, his face no longer friendly, a phone pressed to his ear. Tasha and Dre were gone, the laptops cleared, and Marcus's stomach dropped as Rico's words cut through the fog. "He's ready, come get him." The door burst open, and 4 men in black tactical gear stormed in, their boots scuffing the warped floorboards. They were Horizon's private security, their patches glinting, and they dragged Marcus to his feet, his legs buckling. Rico pocketed a wad of cash, his eyes avoiding Marcus's, and muttered that Horizon paid better than principal. The betrayal was a blade, sharper than James's leak, deeper than the sniper's graze. The guards hauled Marcus into a van, its interior cold, smelling of metal and fear, and drove 6 miles to a sprawling warehouse, its windows blacked out, the air inside damp and sour. They locked him in a concrete room, 10 by 10 feet, its walls stained with mold, a single bulb swinging overhead. Evelyn Harper stepped in, her flight attendant uniform swapped for a tailored suit, her face a mask of cold triumph. She leaned close, her perfume sharp, and taunted him, saying he'd never outrun her network. They'd framed him for embezzling Horizon's funds, she said, planting fake transactions in his name, enough to lock him away for life. The FAA leak was contained, she added, Sarah's story killed by a bot editor. Marcus's head spun, the drug's haze fading, replaced by rage. Rico's double cross, the security team, the embezzlement frame. It was all Horizon, Evelyn's masters pulling strings. She smirked, saying he'd pushed too far, that the warehouse was his last stop. The guards tightened their grips, their knuckles white, and Marcus's eyes darted to the bulb, its flicker a faint lifeline. He'd trusted Rico, believed the FAA emails would end this, but Horizon had outplayed him, turning his ally into a traitor, his evidence into a trap. The concrete chilled his feet, the warehouse's silence broken by a distant hum, maybe a truck, maybe his last chance. Evelyn turned to leave, her heels clicking, and Marcus's mind raced, searching for a way out, a way to fight. The embezzlement frame was a lie, but the world would believe it, just like the terrorist label, the doctored video, the bribed judge. He'd lost Lena, Carla, his home, and now Rico, but the truth was still out there, somewhere. As the guards shoved him against the wall, their breath hot, Marcus vowed to escape, to expose Evelyn's master. But who was paying Rico? And what would they do next? Hey folks, let's unpack this. Ever been stabbed in the back by someone you trusted? Comment 1 if you're gutted by Rico's betrayal, or 2 if you think Marcus can still turn this around. Like this video, hit subscribe, and tap that bell to stay locked in for justice. Now here's the big question. Can Marcus break free from this trap, or will Evelyn's network bury him for good? Marcus Tate's wrists burned against the zip ties binding him to a rusted chair, the concrete floor of the warehouse chilling his bare feet. The single bulb overhead buzzed, its dim light swaying across the mold-streaked walls, 10 by 10 feet of despair. Evelyn Harper's taunt still echoed, her smug reveal of the embezzlement frame and her exit, heels clicking, leaving Marcus with 2 Horizon security guards, their faces hard, their fists clenched. The air was damp, heavy with the scent of oil and decay, and Marcus's head throbbed from Rico's drugged soda, the betrayal a fresh wound. His grazed arm, bandaged by Rico hours ago, ached under the hoodie, the blood crusting through the gauze. The warehouse, 6 miles from Atlanta's heart, was a tomb, and Evelyn's parting words, "This is your last stop," rang true. But Marcus overheard a hushed exchange between the guards, their voices low outside the door. They mentioned a plan, to stage his death as a suicide, to silence him forever, their boots scuffing the floor as they debated who'd pull the trigger. Marcus's pulse spiked, adrenaline cutting through the drug's fog. He scanned the room, his eyes landing on a loose nail protruding from the chair's armrest, its tip glinting faintly, his fingers strained, the zip ties biting, but he worked the nail free, its jagged edge a lifeline. The guards' voices grew louder, their argument heating, and Marcus sawed at the ties, his wrists raw, the plastic snapping after agonizing minutes. He stood, legs shaky, and crept to the door, its hinges rusted, the lock a simple bolt. The guards were distracted, one lighting a cigarette, its smoke curling through the crack. Marcus slid the bolt, heart pounding, and slipped into the warehouse's cavernous interior, its shadows thick with stacked crates and humming generators. The September night outside was close, 90 degrees, and Marcus sprinted through the maze, his sneakers silent on the concrete. A shout echoed behind him, the guards spotting his absence, and gunfire cracked, bullets pinging off metal beams. Marcus dove behind a pallet, splinters grazing his cheek, and ran again. The warehouses. Exit a faint glow 50 yards away. He burst into an industrial lot, the air sharp with diesel, and weaved through rusted shipping containers, 8 miles from downtown. The guards' flashlights swept the darkness, their curses loud, but Marcus's legs burned with purpose, pushing him through a chain-link fence, its barbs tearing his sleeve. He hit the street, Atlanta's neon pulse flickering, and flagged a cab, its driver squinting at his bloodied arm but taking him to a diner 12 miles away, a place Sarah, the journalist, had once mentioned as safe. The cab smelled of vinyl and pine air freshener, and Marcus sank into the seat, his breath ragged, the nail still clutched in his fist. At the diner, a greasy spoon with flickering fluorescence, Marcus found Sarah at a corner booth, her laptop open, her face tense. She gasped at his state, the graze, the blood, but listened as he spilled everything. Rico's betrayal, Evelyn's frame, the warehouse plan. He handed her the secure drive Tasha had used, still in his pocket, loaded with the FAA bribery emails. Sarah uploaded it to her outlet server, and by morning the story aired nationally, a bombshell. Horizon bribes FAA, endangers passengers. The report detailed millions in payments to ignore faulty planes, with emails naming Evelyn as the bagman. Marcus watched it on the diner's TV, the volume low, the waitress pouring coffee that smelled of burnt grounds. The story trended, Oz Horizon crash spiking, and Marcus felt a rush, believing he'd escaped and struck back. Sarah said regulators were investigating, that Evelyn's network was crumbling. He leaned back, the booth's vinyl creaking, thinking he was safe, that the truth would shield him. But Horizon's claws were deeper. That afternoon, as Marcus sipped lukewarm coffee, a news alert flashed. A Horizon flight, carrying 200 passengers, had nearly crashed over Georgia. Its navigation system hacked, forcing an emergency landing. The anchor, her voice grave, said authorities blamed Marcus Tate, citing his terrorist label and the FAA leak as proof of sabotage. The diner's patrons turned, their eyes narrowing, and Sarah's face paled, her laptop slamming shut. Marcus's stomach dropped, the coffee turning sour in his throat. The hack was no coincidence. Evelyn's team, maybe the texter's shadow, had struck again, twisting his escape into a national crisis. His face was back on screens, now a terrorist who endangered lives. The FAA story buried under fear. Sarah whispered that the feds were closing in, that the diner wasn't safe. Marcus stood, his arm throbbing, the nail tucked in his pocket, and slipped out the back, the alley's pavement slick with grease. Sirens wailed, 3 blocks away, and Marcus ran, the city's heat pressing down, his shadow long under the streetlights. The near crash was a lie, a frame bigger than the embezzlement designed to bury him under public panic. He'd escaped the warehouse, gotten the truth out, but Horizon had countered with chaos, risking lives to paint him as a monster. The diner's neon sign faded behind him, the 12-mile trek to another contact's hideout looming. His mind raced, replaying Evelyn's taunts, the guard's plan, the hacked flight. Someone above her was orchestrating this, someone with tech to rival governments. Marcus's sneakers pounded the sidewalk, the sirens closer now, their red lights flashing in the distance. He'd shaken Horizon, forced their hand, but at what cost? The FAA truth was out, but the terrorist label was tighter, the manhunt fiercer. As he ducked into a side street, the city's pulse chaotic, he vowed to trace the hack, to expose the mastermind. But how far did their reach go? And what would they unleash next? Marcus Tate crouched in the shadows of a narrow alley, the September night heavy with the scent of wet asphalt and distant smoke. His grazed arm throbbed under the blood-crusted hoodie, the nail from his warehouse escape still tucked in his pocket, a reminder of how close he'd come to death 12 hours ago. The diner's neon glow, where he'd leaked the FAA bribery evidence, was 10 miles behind him. But the news of the hacked Horizon flight, nearly crashed and pinned on him, had turned Atlanta into a manhunt. Sirens wailed, their red lights slicing, through the city's pulse, and Marcus's face was everywhere, branded a terrorist on every screen. Evelyn Harper's network, those Horizon Airlines masterminds, had escalated from snipers to sabotaging a plane, risking 200 lives to frame him. His lungs burned as he slipped into a black neighborhood, 5 miles from downtown, its row houses weathered but alive with music and laughter. A contact from Lena's shattered activist group, a barber named Malik, had promised refuge here, where the community had followed Marcus's fight since the viral flight video, now at 20 million views. Malik met him at a back door, his apron dusted with hair, and ushered him into a basement. Its walls lined with crates of canned food, the air cool at 80 degrees. The space was a hub, Malik said, for locals who'd shielded others from police sweeps. Neighbors, from grandmothers to teens, slipped in, their eyes fierce, offering Marcus water, a clean shirt, a plate of collards that smelled of smoked turkey. They called him a hero, saying the FAA leak had exposed Horizon's rot, that they believed his truth over the terrorist lies. Marcus's chest tightened, their faith a balm after Rico's betrayal, the cross burning, the sniper's bullet. He thanked them, his voice rough, and Malik clapped his shoulder, saying the community was ready to fight. Marcus devised a plan. A massive protest outside Horizon's headquarters, 3 miles away, to demand Evelyn's arrest and a federal probe. Malik spread the word, and by dawn, hundreds gathered, their signs handmade, their chants a roar. Truth for Marcus, down with Horizon. Marcus stood among them, his hoodie swapped for a borrowed jacket, its collar stiff, and felt their energy, a tide against the system's weight. The protest swelled to thousands, spilling across Peachtree Street, news vans circling like vultures. Social media lit up, your Horizon crash and our justice for Marcus trending globally, the FAA story resurfacing despite the near-crash smear. Marcus spoke through a megaphone, his voice cracking but strong, recounting the flight, the bribes, the frames, the violence. The crowd cheered, their fists raised, and Horizon's glass tower loomed, its executives surely watching. Reporters pushed through, their cameras flashing, and a CNN anchor called the protest a turning point, pressuring Horizon's board. Marcus felt a surge, believing the tide had turned, that Evelyn's network was cornered, their lies crumbling under the world's gaze. He pictured Lena, still jailed, smiling at this defiance, and vowed to free her, to end this war. But Horizon's claws were sharper than hope. As the protest peaked, dusk painting the sky orange, a ripple of unease spread. Malik whispered that strangers had joined the crowd, their faces hidden under hoods, their movements off. Marcus scanned the sea of signs, his gut twisting, and spotted a man slipping a backpack under a parked car, its zipper glinting. Before he could shout, a blast shook the street, a fireball erupting 50 yards away, glass shattering from nearby shops. Screams pierced the air, smoke thick with the stench of burning rubber, and 2 more explosions followed, smaller but deadly, tearing through the crowd. Blood stained the pavement, dozens injured, their cries mingling with sirens. Marcus dove behind a mailbox, its metal dented, his ears ringing as Malik pulled him to safety. The protest fractured, some running, others fighting to help the wounded. News helicopters buzzed overhead, their feeds live, and Marcus's heart sank as anchors blamed him, calling the bombs a terrorist act by Marcus Tate, the fugitive who'd incited chaos. The crowd's unity splintered, some faces turning to him, doubt creeping in, whispers of betrayal cutting deeper than the blasts. Malik swore the bombs weren't theirs, that Evelyn's allies had infiltrated, planting the devices to frame Marcus. The evidence was clear, Malik said, pointing to the hooded figures vanishing into alleys, their timing too perfect. Marcus's mind raced, the FAA leak, the shareholders' meeting, the warehouse, all leading to this. Horizon risking lives to bury him. The community had shielded him, marched for him, but now their trust wavered, the terrorist label cemented by blood and fire. Police swarmed, their riot gear glinting, and Marcus ran, Malik covering him, the crowd's chaos a shield. He slipped into a side street, 4 miles from the tower, his jacket torn, the nail in his pocket a weight. The bombs had turned allies into accusers, his name a curse again. Social media exploded, Marcus the Bomber trending, drowning out the truth. The community's warmth, their collards, their faith, felt like a dream, shattered by Horizon's cruelty. Marcus's legs shook, the city's neon lights blurring as he headed for a new hideout. 6 miles out, a church Malik had named. The protest was meant to break Horizon, but Evelyn's network had countered with carnage, framing him for murder. His grazed arm bled anew, the gauze soaked, and he pressed on, the sirens fading but the helicopters circling, their searchlights sweeping. The mastermind behind Evelyn, the texter, the bombs, was out there, their power vast, their next move unknown. Marcus gripped the nail, his resolve steel, vowing to expose them, to reclaim the community's trust. But as flames lit the skyline, Atlanta burning behind him, he wondered how many more would pay for his fight and what Horizon would do to end it. Marcus Tate stumbled through Atlanta's pre-dawn fog, the September air thick with the scent of charred wood and distant sirens. The bombs at the Horizon protest, 6 hours ago, had left the city reeling, their flames etching scars across Peachtree Street, 4 miles back. His grazed arm throbbed under a torn hoodie, the nail from his warehouse escape a heavy weight in his pocket. The community that had sheltered him, fed him collards, chanted his name, now doubted him. The terrorist label cemented by Evelyn Harper's network. Those Horizon Airlines architects of chaos. The bombs, blamed on him, had injured dozens, turning
allies into accusers, and Mark, a fugitive in a city that burned with his name. His sneakers caked with mud carried him to his hideout, miles from the protests. Steeple, a shadow against the gray sky.
The pastor, a wiry woman named Esther, had been tipped by Malik, and she hid Marcus in a basement, its air cool at 75 degrees, the walls lined with hymnals and folding chairs. Esther's eyes, kind but wary, studied him as she handed him a burner phone, its battery full, a lifeline after his last one died. Marcus's mind raced, replaying the bombs, the near crash, Rico's betrayal, the sniper's shot. Evelyn's network had escalated at every turn, from lies to murder, and he had one move left. Esther mentioned a Horizon server room, 2 miles away, a data hub unprotected during the protest chaos. If Marcus could infiltrate it, upload every scrap of evidence, the bribes, the frames, the bombs, to every news outlet, he could expose Evelyn's masters. He nodded, his jaw tight, knowing the risk. The church's stained glass windows glowed faintly, and Marcus slipped out, the fog cloaking his path. The server room was in a nondescript office park, its security lax, guards distracted by the city's unrest. Marcus picked the lock, his nails steady, and entered a humming chamber, rows of blinking servers casting a blue haze. He plugged in a flash drive, loaded with Lena's bribe ledger, Sarah's FAA emails, and protest footage proving the bombs weren't his. His fingers flew, uploading to global news servers, the progress bar crawling under the 90-degree heat of the machines. By dawn, the files hit, a digital tsunami. Horizon's bribes, frames, and bombs exposed. CNN, BBC, Al Jazeera ran the story, the evidence undeniable, and Horizon's stock crashed 30% in hours. Social media exploded. True Horizon falls, trending, and Marcus watched from a stolen tablet, the server room's hum a heartbeat. Evelyn's allies named in the emails abandoned her, the FAA launching a full probe, grounding Horizon's fleet. Marcus's chest swelled, a real victory. Not the fleeting hopes of the courthouse, the protest, the leak. He'd done it, exposed the machine, cleared his name. He slipped out, the morning sun piercing the fog, believing he'd won, that Evelyn was finished. But Horizon's venom was deeper. As Marcus reached a safe house 8 miles away, a text buzzed the burner. "We have Maya." His sister Maya, 32, a teacher who'd stayed out of his fight, was their target. The message included a photo. Maya bound in a dark room, her eyes wide with fear. Evelyn's voice followed in a video, her face twisted, demanding Marcus retract the evidence, delete the uploads, or Maya would die. The safe house, A cramped attic smelling of dust and cedar felt like a trap, its single skylight mocking his hope. Marcus's hands shook, the tablet slipping, the victory turning to ash. Evelyn's network, cornered, had lashed out, kidnapping Maya to force his silence. He traced the text signal, a trick Lena had taught, and pinpointed an abandoned airfield 10 miles out, a relic of Atlanta's industrial past. Marcus drove a borrowed pickup, its engine rattling, the nail in his pocket, his mind a storm. The airfield's tarmac was cracked, weeds piercing through, and Evelyn waited in a hangar, its rusted walls looming under a noon sun. Maya was tied to a chair, 2 guards flanking her, their guns glinting. Evelyn in a black coat, her flight attendant polish gone, sneered, saying Marcus had pushed too far. She demanded he call Sarah, retract the story, claim it was a hoax. Marcus's eyes met Maya's, her tears a knife in his chest, and he nodded, raising his hands, the burner phone visible. He dialed Sarah, his voice steady, saying he'd lied, that the evidence was fake. Evelyn smirked, but Marcus's thumb hovered over the phone's record button, capturing her every word. He asked why she'd framed him, goading her, and Evelyn spilled it all, the bribes, the bombs, the orders from above, her voice a venomous rant. Marcus hung up, his heart pounding, and Evelyn's face shifted, realizing his play. She screamed for the guards to shoot, but Marcus dove, tackling Maya's chair, shielding her as bullets sparked off the hangar's walls. The guards advanced, their boots echoing, and Marcus whispered to Maya to stay low. He'd surrendered to save her, but Evelyn's rant was on the phone, a confession that could end her. The hangar's heat, 95 degrees pressed down, the guards' shadows closing in. Marcus gripped the nail, his arm bleeding anew, and realized Evelyn's desperation meant more. She'd kill them both, evidence or not. The airfields. Silence was broken by a distant rumble. Maybe help, maybe Horizon's backup. Marcus's mind raced, the bombs, the sniper, Rico, all leading to this. He'd exposed Horizon, but Maya's life hung in the balance and Evelyn's masters were still out there, their next move a mystery. As the guards raised their guns, Marcus vowed to get Maya out, to finish this fight. But what was that rumble, and who was coming? Marcus Tate shielded his sister Maya, their bodies pressed against the hangar's cracked concrete, the airfield's September heat suffocating at 95 degrees. Bullets sparked off the rusted walls, Evelyn Harper's guards closing in, their guns steady, their eyes cold. Evelyn's face was a mask of fury, her black coat billowing as she screamed for Marcus's death, her confession still recording on his burner phone, hidden in his palm. The nail from his warehouse escape, dug into his thigh, a reminder of every fight, the flight, the jail, the bombs. Maya's sobs shook her bound frame, her chair toppled, and Marcus whispered for her to stay still, his grazed arm bleeding through the hoodie, the pain a dull roar. The hangar, 10 miles from Atlanta's chaos, was a death trap, Evelyn's plan. Clear. Kill them both to silence the evidence he'd uploaded, the bribes, the frames, the protest bombs that had shattered his world. His server room gambit had crashed Horizon stock, exposed their corruption globally, but Evelyn's network, those unseen masters, had countered with Maya's kidnapping, forcing this standoff. The distant rumble he'd heard grew louder, a vibration shaking the tarmac, and Marcus's heart leapt, hope flickering. Was it help or Horizon's backup? He'd goaded Evelyn into spilling her crimes, the bribes to judges, the FAA cover-ups, the orders for the sniper and bombs. Her voice a venomous stream captured live. His thumb had hit the livestream button mid-call, broadcasting to Sarah's news outlet, a desperate play as he'd faked surrender. The phone's battery was low, but the red dot blinked, millions watching Evelyn's unraveling. She hadn't noticed, her rage blinding her, and Marcus kept talking, his voice low, asking who gave the orders, who was above her. Evelyn sneered, saying he'd never touch Richard Holt, Horizon's CEO, the man who'd framed him to seize his investments, to fund their empire of lies. The revelation hit like a fist. Holt's oily promise at the shareholders' meeting now a betrayal deeper than Rico's, James's, the system's. Marcus's mind raced, the nail cutting into his palm, Maya's breath steadying beside him. The rumble became a roar, helicopter blades chopping the air, and floodlights pierced the hangar's gloom. blinding the guards. Evelyn spun, her coat flapping, as FBI agents stormed in, their vests marked, their shouts sharp. "Drop your weapons!" Marcus's chest swelled, relief flooding him. Lena, freed from jail by Sarah's legal push, had tipped the feds, tracking the livestream signal. The guards hesitated, guns lowering, and Evelyn lunged for Marcus, her nails clawing. But an agent tackled her, cuffs snapping on her wrists. Her screams echoed, a wild howl of defeat, as the agents freed Maya, her tears soaking Marcus's shoulder as he held her. The phone's live stream cut out, its battery dead, but the damage was done. Evelyn's confession, Holt's name, had reached 20 million viewers, trending as Tark Horizon Exposed. The hangar's air was thick with dust, the choppers, blades slowing outside, and Marcus stood, his legs shaky, Maya clinging to him. The feds secured the scene, their radios crackling, and an agent, a black woman with a steady gaze, confirmed Evelyn was headed to federal custody, the FAA probe now targeting Horizon's board. Marcus's evidence, the ledger, the emails, the bombs, was airtight, she said, and his terrorist label was crumbling. He nodded, the weight of weeks lifting, the flight's mockery, the jail's hunger, the cross burning, the sniper's bullet, all leading to this. He'd won, exposed Evelyn. Saved Maya, but Holt's name gnawed at him. The agent's radio buzzed, a report that Holt had vanished, his private jet gone from Hartsfield-Jackson, 8 miles away. Marcus's stomach twisted, the victory tainted. Holt had orchestrated everything, the bribed judge, the doctored video, the bombs, to steal Marcus's shares, to keep Horizon's corruption flying. The agent said they'd hunt him, but Marcus saw the truth. Holt was the texter, the shadow, and he'd slipped the net, vowing revenge. Maya gripped his hand, her voice soft, saying they were alive, that it was enough. Marcus hugged her, the hangar's walls fading, but Holt's escape was a splinter in his mind. They walked into the dawn, the airfield's tarmac glinting, FBI vans idling. Atlanta's skyline 10 miles off shimmered. The protest's smoke cleared, and supporters gathered at the airfield's edge, their cheers a distant hum. News of Evelyn's arrest spreading. Marcus's arm bled, the nail still in his pocket, a relic of his fight. He'd lost his home, his wealth, his trust in friends. But he'd torn down Evelyn's empire, exposed a system that thrived on prejudice. The agent offered protective custody, but Marcus shook his head, his eyes on the horizon. He'd start over, build something new, a vision forming as the sun rose. Months later, Marcus stood in a small office 15 miles from Atlanta's core, the air crisp at 70 degrees. He'd launched Unity Airlines, a carrier built on fairness, its first plane named for Lena, now free and advising him. Supporters had crowdfunded the start. Millions donated after the live stream. And Unity's logo, a soaring bird, adorned the wall. Maya taught at a local school, her smile bright again. And Marcus hired Carla, Malik, even the diner waitress, their faith, repaid. The office smelled of fresh paint and coffee, its windows open to a clear sky. Unity's first flight was booked, a route from Atlanta to Chicago, and Marcus felt a spark, a new fight against the system's rot. Social media buzzed, your Unity Air trending, and news outlets praised his resilience, the man who'd beaten Horizon. But at night, Marcus checked his phone, a new one, its screen unmarred. No texts came, but Holt was out there, his wealth hidden, his allies silent. The FBI had no leads, and Marcus knew the CEO's vow wasn't empty. He'd exposed one head of the beast, but another waited, its claws sharp. As Unity's first plane taxied 5 miles away, Marcus stood on the tarmac, his jacket new, his arm scarred but healing. The crowd cheered, their voices a chorus, and Marcus waved, his heart full but wary. He'd fought for justice, won a battle, but the war wasn't over. Holt's shadow loomed, and Marcus vowed to face it, to keep flying, to never bow. The plane roared into the sky, its engines a promise, and Marcus turned back, ready for whatever came next. Marcus Tate's journey in Flight Attendant calls passenger homeless, not knowing he funds the airline, reveals the brutal weight of systemic racism and the unyielding power of resilience. From Evelyn Harper's mocking sneer on a buy, Horizon Airlines' flight to the bombs that framed him as a terrorist, Marcus faced a machine designed to crush him. Rigged trials, doctored videos, cross-burnings, sniper shots, and betrayals. Each false victory, from courtroom hopes to protest chants, was met with escalating cruelty, showing how deeply prejudice embeds in institutions, from airlines to courts to communities. Yet Marcus's fight, fueled by cunning and heart, teaches us that truth can pierce even the thickest lies. His live-streamed confession, exposing Evelyn and naming Horizon's CEO Richard Holt, sparked a global outcry, proving one voice can shake empires. But Holt's escape reminds us the battle against racism is never fully won, demanding constant vigilance. Marcus's launch of Unity Airlines, built on fairness, shows that from ashes, new paths rise, but only through relentless struggle. This story urges us to confront bias in our spaces, to amplify the silenced, to never bow to injustice. Marcus lost his home, his wealth, but gained a legacy of defiance. We learned to stand firm, to question power, to rebuild despite odds. What's your take? Comment 1 if you've faced prejudice and fought back, or 2 if you think Marcus's story inspires change. Like, subscribe, and share to spread this fight for justice. Thank you for joining Marcus's journey. Here's to building a world where truth soars.